Hello my dear students, welcome back to Sumayya's English Classroom. In this video, let's learn excerpt Footprints Without Feet from the novel Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Footprints without feet. Sounds interesting, right? Yes, in this chapter, someone wants to be invisible. Then he becomes invisible. Then what happened? That is what discussed in this story. First, let me ask you, do you want to invisible? If you are invisible, what will you do? Will you do something good for others or will you misuse it? Please leave your answer in the comment box. Anyway, in this chapter, you will see a person who was a scientist. His name was Griffin. He discovered some potion to make a man invisible. Then he becomes invisible. Then what did he do? That is what in this chapter. Let's go to the chapter in detail through some points. Okay. H.G. Wells was an English writer of novels, short stories, and works of social commentary, satire, biography, and autobiography, and even 2 books on recreational war games. He is now best remembered for his science fiction novels and is often called the father of science fiction. The story is about a scientist named Griffin. He had been discovering ways which could make a man invisible and finally swallowed certain drugs that made him invisible. He was noticed by 2 boys in a staircase of a house. They could see some footsteps only and started following. In this chapter, Mr. Griffin is introduced as a scientist. He was so smart and intelligent. He was very educated. He was smart enough to discover some potion to make a man invisible. He was noticed by 2 boys in a staircase of a house. They could see some footsteps only and started following. They haven't seen a man. They follow it until the footsteps are fainter and cannot be seen. Actually, they were following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. That scientist was Griffin. Griffin, though smart, was a criminal. His body became transparent as a sheet of glass. He was brilliant but a lawless person. What did he do? He set fire to his landlord's house just because the landlord wanted him to leave the house. Here is a question for you. Why did Griffin set his landlord's house on fire? Write the answer in the comment box. Thus, Griffin was homeless, without money or clothes, and he was also invisible. To be invisible, he had to remove his clothes. Thus, he became naked too, but invisible. It was cold in London, and now our Griffin was without clothes. So, he planned to break into a store to escape the cold winter night. When the store closed, Griffin indulged himself by dressing himself in warm clothes. He broke open boxes and took warm clothes from there. He became fully dressed with shoes, an overcoat, and a wide-brimmed hat. He got food from a nearby restaurant. He had cold meat and coffee there in the kitchen of the restaurant and wine from a grocery store. Now, well clothed and well fed, Griffin fell asleep in the store on the pile of quills. He was discovered in the morning by the store assistants. Then he entered a theatrical company and wore bandages on his face, dark glasses, a false nose, and bushy side whiskers. He robbed the shopkeeper of his money and escaped to Iping village by train to avoid being caught. Empty space above his shoulders was covered now. He got all these materials from a theatrical company at Drury Lane. From here, he escaped to a village called Iping. He stayed at an inn in the village Iping. The inn was owned by Mrs. Hall. He explained Mrs. Hall, its owner, that he had an accident and didn't want to be disturbed. Soon his money finished, and so he robbed a clergyman's house using his invisibility. Yes, for a short time, Griffin enjoyed a peaceful time at the inn in the village. However, after some time, his stolen money ran out. Soon after, there was a curious incident, a curious episode happened at the clergyman's house. What happened? At dawn, the clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises from their study room. The clergyman quietly entered the room to catch the intruder, but was shocked to see the room empty. He and his wife looked under the desk, behind the curtains, and even up the chimney. There wasn't a sign of anybody. They were shocked to see that housekeeping money was missing. Then here is a question for you. What was the curious episode that took place in the clergyman's study? Write the answer in the comment box. That day, Mrs. Hall and her husband surprised to see their guest's door open. So no one was allowed to enter that room. Now it is open. So mistress and her husband attempt to check Griffin's room in his absence. However, as they entered the room, they heard a sniff close to their ears. Yes, it is the invisible man just behind them. Then a hat flew at Mrs. Hall. Finally, the bedroom chair flew from its place and rushed forward to attack the couple. They were afraid. They were pushed out of the room by the chair. At first, they thought that the trouble was caused by a witchcraft. They rushed out of the room, but the couple heard the news of the robbery at the clergyman's house. Then they were all suspicious about the scientist. Then here comes a question for you. Why were they surprised when they opened the room? Write the answer in the comment box. Miss Hall sent for the village constable. Then she went to the scientist and asked where he was appeared from and how he entered the locked room. He became so angry. Furiously, he took off his bandages. The couple was horrified to see that no head was on his shoulder. The people was horrified to see a headless man. He threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and even nose. Just then, Mrs. Jaffers, who was Mrs. Jaffers? He was the constable. He arrived there. Who was Mr. Jaffers? Mr. Jaffers was a dutiful man. He tried to arrest Griffin but found it increasingly difficult as Griffin started shredding his clothes. Okay. He got hit by invisible blows and poor Jaffers was knocked down unconscious. Mr. Griffin had shaken himself free and escaped from there. No one knew where to lay hands on him. He mastered science and technology, but unfortunately, he failed to do something good for the society with that discovery. Yes, dear, science is to be used positively and to improve the conditions of human beings. And it is used positively for humanity. But Mr. Griffin is a lawless person and it brings a tragic end to his life. So my dear students, education is to reform us to a civilized person, to support the human beings or the humankind, not to be a criminal to destroy the world. We should be productive and creative when we acquire knowledge and skill, but not to be destructive to end the world. Here is the next question for you, an important question. Analyze Griffin as a brilliant scientist but a lawless person. Now let's look at the theme of this chapter. The story Footprints Without Feet describes the story of a brilliant scientist, Griffin, who degenerated himself into a lawless person. He was well educated and intelligent. He was smart enough to discover the potion that made a man invisible. He mastered science, but unfortunately he failed to do anything good with that discovery. Science is to be used positively for humanity. It's to improve human conditions. But Mr. Griffin was a lawless person. He did now use the power of invisibility for the welfare of the society. Now let's go to the character sketches. First, let's see the character sketch of Mrs. Hall. Mrs. Hall is a very friendly, down-to-earth woman who enjoys socializing with her guests. She had proved this by asking for the stranger's coat to let it dry in the kitchen. She tried to get into conversation with her visitor, here Mr. Griffin. Mrs. Hall is a woman who lives in Iping and who runs the Coach and Horses Inn with her husband, Mr. Hall. She is a polite, decent woman who faithfully overlooks Griffin's strange behavior when he promises to pay her more money for his stay. Now let's see of Mr. Griffin. Griffin is an eccentric scientist. He was very gifted, but used his mind in a sinister way. He devised an experiment to become invisible and then started looting and murdering whoever came in his way. Working reclusively in his flat, he invents a formula to bend light and reduce the refractive index of physical objects, making them invisible. He experiments on himself and makes himself invisible. He misuses his talents and he became monstrous in his activities. Okay dears, now we have gone through the chapter through some important points. Then you have got the exam hearts. Okay, I hope that this video was so helpful to you to learn this particular chapter. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If so, like my video and subscribe to my channel to get more English lessons. See you soon in the next video. Love learning.